I call Vikki Slade to move new clause 1.
I beg to move new clause 1. You'll speak now. Madam Deputy Speaker, business rate reform is long overdue. It is frequently cited by my constituents as the biggest concern for their survival and one of the most direct inhibitors to their growth. I was contacted just this week by a local business in Three-Legged Cross, right on the edge of my constituency. He's been running for over 40 years, and the cliff edge created by the small business rate relief means his rates bill is going up from £2,800 a year to £8,500. The only thing that will save this micro business is systemic change, as proposed by the Lib Dems in our manifesto, and not a tax based on the arbitrary valuation that bears no relationship to the activity taking place inside his building. High streets are trying to redefine themselves, moving from the heart of goods purchasing to literal shop windows as they struggle to compete against online competitors who don't have their overheads. But it would be wrong to think that the solution is to try to return to the perfect high street of the past, as if such a thing exists. I'm old enough to remember C&A being the place that me and my friends would browse for the latest fashions, with a Blockbuster video store and a pick and mix from Woolies. Where are they now? It is dangerous and self-defeating to be caught up in the toxic nostalgia trying to reclaim the past as some kind of perfect place. Parliament must create legislation that supports the society of tomorrow and towels that will work for a technological, multicultural age, and indeed one in which people can no longer afford stuff that we used to buy on a Saturday afternoon, or, like I am today, choosing to buy their stuff from second-hand stores. The dangerous gap between the slashing of retail, hospitality and leisure relief by almost half to a regime that brings in as yet undefined new multipliers brings with it real risk. Our new Clause 1 would require a review of the impact of Clauses 1 to 4 on businesses, high streets and on the real prize, so frequently repeated by this government, economic growth. There's been a lot of talk in recent months about decisions being made without clear impact assessments, and as we move through a period of reform to enshrine this into law, rather than question whether it's been done later, would save us all a lot of trouble and demonstrate that the government genuinely wants to improve improvements. Yeah, of course.
Lib Dem Spokesperson giving way. One of the other issues that she hasn't had a look at, or certainly hasn't mentioned yet, is the employment rights bill that's going to come into play as well, that puts further red tape on our high street businesses and the impact that would have. Would the Lib Dems consider that should be a consideration for this government? Because it's one thing having these taxes and these rates changed, it's another thing then putting red tape at the very same time constraining these businesses with their growth.
Thank you. I thank you for your intervention, and I agree that this is a really difficult time to be a small business with so many things changing at the same time, not least the national insurance rates that are increasing. But just to move back to the role of the high streets, the most successful high streets are moving quickly to reinvent themselves. And since being elected, I've been trying to find myself a high street location for my constituency office. Decided to base myself in the historic market town of Wimborne, where my mum lived and my children went to school. It's the fastest growing community in mid-Dorset and Northpool. The ministers will have heard about it many times as I talk about the problems with housing there. Great bus routes, great place to find a small unit, but I was wrong. Such is the strength of the sense of place, the innovation of its businesses and the hard work of its bid and its town council, that when a business closes down, there are others waiting to move in. I finally found my new home, which will open by the end of the month when we fitted it out, but the experience proved what I already knew. The high street can survive, but only when the business community is prepared to give people what they want. With retailers like Tickles & Co. trading alongside the hospice shop, and then old businesses like Bartlett's with 120 years of selling smart clothes for all seasons, able to sustain despite the changes in the market. The Lib Dems welcome the proposal to permanently reduce the business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure, and we do acknowledge that the financial situation they've been left in by the previous government would make the 75% discount difficult to maintain. But any discount is worthless if these businesses trying to stabilise following the COVID pandemic, the energy crisis and a shift to online cashless purchasing don't even make it through the next year. I have previously commented that this is not the reform that business needs. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister has already said this is just phase 1, but we are incredibly frustrated that he's not taken the opportunity to take things further. New Clause 3, in the name of my honourable friend, the member for St Albans, focuses this further on the retail, hospitality and leisure sector and raises some really valid points about the risk to the individual businesses against those with multiple branches. And this assessment does need to take place alongside a broader impact assessment.
On that point?
Of course.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. She's giving an impassioned speech about the importance of business rates reform. Would she agree with me that there is a risk of unintended consequences with what the government is proposing? At the moment, with the 75% relief, there is a cap of that relief at £110,000, but in 2 years' time, when the relief goes to zero, that cap won't exist. House of Commons library research shows that the net effect could be that small businesses could end up being 80% worse off, whilst the big chains, such as Starbucks, could actually be 40% better off. And whilst it's important we get a review of the impact of business rates, it's important we also get that differential assessment as well, as set out in new clause 3.
Thank you. I completely agree with you. I think this is one of the problems we are seeing, is that law of unintended consequences that we've also seen with things like the national insurance that we repeat over and over again, that is impacting on small businesses, hospices, doctor surgeries and things like that, when it is quite understandable that there's an attempt to try and raise funds from elsewhere. I just want to share the views of Anthony Woodhouse. Unfortunately, I'm not able to be at their event in Portcullis House because of today's timing. He's the chair of Hall & Woodhouse Brewery and Pub Chain, founded and based in Dorset, but with a branch just across the way from this place. He told me that the revaluing of property when you've just invested huge amounts of money to make it fit for a changing market, before you've even had a chance to benefit from that changing market, is completely crazy and is discouraging businesses from investing. So it's really important that as we really look to reform business rates, that we look at that as well. Despite a failure to include this, businesses like Anthony's are responding to the market. Pubs like the Olive Branch in Wimborne and the Old Granary on Wareham Quay are now places where muddy boots, children and dogs are welcome, and where they sell as many cups of coffee as pints of local beer. And the high street needs to morph as they do, and they need to be ready and willing to change. But while business rate reform rightly starts with the high street, it's important it doesn't end with the high street. And so I turn to our amendments 1 to 6, which would add manufacturing businesses to the lower multiplier. The UK has a rich history of manufacturing excellence, and the Barclays Made in Britain report found that British-made products held an important influence over consumers' decision to purchase, with customers perceiving them to be high quality, reliable and internationally respected. The Made in Britain tag was found to be worth an additional £3.5 billion a year to our UK exporters, which is why we believe that the lower multiplier should also apply to manufacturing businesses. We need to give them a shot in the arm to ensure that they can compete on the world stage. The threats by the incoming President Trump to put tariff on UK products, our continued isolation from our neighbours through an inadequate Brexit deal, and the rapid growth of economies like China and India represent a real threat to local manufacturing. Pool Holdings, based in my constituency, has stood ready to produce its innovative Cool Pack here in the UK. Anybody that's got children will know the brand Cool Pack. It's that ice pack that's not even ice. And they have been modifying the equipment so that they can make the product here in Dorset to compete with China. They stand ready to drive up those sales. Recognition through a lower multiplier, or at least the potential to include them in a lower multiplier if the market becomes more tricky, is the intent behind this amendment. And turning to the Amendments 7 and 8 in the name of the Shadow Minister, I reflect that the Liberal Democrats simply do not believe in the taxation of education. Alongside the changes around VAT, the removal of the special status for schools is really disappointing. Therefore, these amendments that seek to recognise the value that schools where children whose needs are difficult to meet elsewhere, whether that's special educational needs and disabilities, or where people are choosing to educate in a faith school, seem reasonable. In summary, Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill is a fair start, and some businesses will feel it's better than the abyss that might otherwise have been. But the government could have and should have taken different decisions to protect those businesses facing additional costs in just a few weeks' time. We are often asked, how would we pay for it then? And I welcome that discussion, as there have been many proposals in our manifesto, from taxing big banks to asking gambling companies to pay their fair share. I recognise, on behalf of the Liberal Democrats, that the government has worked quickly to bring forward this this bill, but the risks of losing businesses en route to something better are just too great.
Yeah.
We need proper reform so that businesses of the mid-21st centuries can weather the storms ahead.
Well done.